Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast featuring real conversations with conscious objectors to the status quo. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have artist Fadl join us for a conversation about deconstructing society's narratives for our lives. Together, we talk about the elusive nature of queerness, learning to love ourselves in relationships, and throwing away the manual to create your own relationship garden. The psychedelic experience of non-monogamy and queerness. I think y'all are in for a treat with today's episode. And one thing that Fadl talked about was coming off of their SSRI to explore the benefits of microdosing, right? And there are a lot of different protocols to microdosing, right? Like the Fadl protocol where you use it twice weekly or every fourth day, the Microdosing Institute every other day, or the statement stack where you're doing 4 to 5 days on followed by 3 to 2 days off, right? There's a lot of different microdosing regimens. And so this is a really big area right now that we don't necessarily have the data or the research on to say for certain. People are trying 0.05 of a gram upwards to 0.3 of a gram and noticing what sort of benefits that they're getting from day to day. But yeah, we really just don't have the research on it. It's extremely underdeveloped at this point. But there is a psychiatrist, Dr. Ben Malcolm, the spirit pharmacist, who talks a lot about this and has a ton of resources on their own platform. I am not a psychiatrist, and that is not my area of expertise. And so I will direct you over to that arena. However, it has been interesting, I would say, to kind of like hear this conversation, at least in my friend groups of people who have come off of SSRIs and enjoyed the benefits of microdosing psilocybin. And it's interesting because Fadl said they were checking in about whether the SSRI was right for them based on their ability to enjoy music that they know they normally enjoy off of the SSRI. And I think that's actually a really interesting way to look at the medicine, right? I mean, we're always weighing a lot of factors in terms of whether these substances are helpful for us or not. And again, psychiatrists, not me, talk to them, right? But we do know that SSRIs and psychedelics have different targets within our serotonin system, and they produce different effects, right? An SSRI will lead to diminished emotional sensitivity, right? That range of what we're able to feel is reduced. And I'm sure many of you could understand the possible benefits of that. Whereas microdosing often leads to that heightened emotional state, right? Which again, I'm sure many of you could see the benefits of and the potential risks, right? For both. It's just an interesting time to be navigating this area of novel science that is coming out. And so I hope y'all, if you are exploring that you are finding a doctor that you can trust to have open and honest conversations about. And that's the most important thing, right? Being able to find a clinician that can assess the current data and the ways that we have been sold incorrect information about drugs and really take a curious approach to this experimental and novel area of the field that is coming out. So I hope all of you can find the resources to have that sort of support. And, it's interesting. Fadl talked about how growing up there was this expectation to go to med school, but that never felt authentic to him. And I can just really resonate with that. I am a first-generation college student, so no one in my family had gone to college. So when you are trying to look out at a new world, a new possibility, you only kind of see what's been shown to you on TV, especially when you don't have it in your own family, right? So that meant I was going to be a doctor of medicine or I was going to be a lawyer, right? Like those are the two options because apparently those are the only two career potentials in the world. But as a first generation student, you just don't know and you go down that path. And then eventually getting there, I realized that this path did not feel right to me. This path did not feel authentic to my soul and what I wanted to explore and do in my lifetime. And so getting off of that path to find a new one was difficult because that was the plan. This is what I was going to do. And now what do I do that I have to make a new choice to create my own path outside of the small, limited possibilities that I thought beforehand? And as we talked about non-monogamy, I was just seeing so many similarities in the ways that as someone growing up watching, The Notebook, listening to Taylor Swift, and just like any rom-com, honestly, still to this day, of the only possible way that I could do love and be happy would be in a monogamous marriage to a man. If we go back to my Christian days, right? Like that was the only way that this could happen. And it was impossible for me to dream of any other future because there was none modeled to me. Like we know from psychology that stories and narratives, archetypes are so deeply important for what we can view for ourselves. Just like I couldn't view any job outside of being a doctor or a lawyer. And again, like great jobs, people love doing those jobs, and monogamy is great for some people. And not everyone should be a doctor. Not everyone should be a lawyer. There are so many different other ways to live our lives and to create the relationships that bring us joy and bring us pleasure. And it can be just so hard because, there's not a single rom-com movie that I can watch right now that gives me that world, that shows me that possibility, that demonstrates a path forward for me to imagine, which means we have to do it on our own, which means we have to get creative. And there's so much joy in that. There's so much possibility. And I'm excited to talk to you today, dear listener, through this conversation about, creating our relationship gardens and some of the pieces that I have been unpacking and exploring in my own life in this fun and wild journey that is love and relationships, and this very, very tender, sweet space that is this podcast, Modern Anarchy, that I share with you, dear listener, and have co-created with the guests that have come on this show who have trusted me to be vulnerable and to have these real conversations. So I'm thankful for you, listener, for tuning in and for sharing this podcast with the people that you love. All right, let's tune into today's episode. Do you have any questions for me before we get into anything?
I mean, I'm sure you've been asked this a bunch, just about, the origin story of this podcast. And I find that it's really interesting, actually, the approach of the previous person who's interviewed nominates the next person. So I found that pretty interesting. I guess like the origin behind the podcast as a whole, but then even more specifically, why that nomination process, if there's something you're trying to get from it, or...
I mean, the origin story would be being a feminist 2 years ago, going through grad school in the pandemic, just being frustrated about a lot of different things. I grew up very Christian, and so there are multiple parts of my identity that have not been accepted from my own family, right? So I feel like part of me wanted to bridge that sort of gap between their Mormon understanding of the world and my understanding of the world. Like, how could we get closer? How could we have conversations? I think that in terms of the nomination process, my lens existentially only puts me right here, right? And so I'm not always seeing other things, thinking about other things. So when other guests get to decide like where it goes, then the podcast is not so much just my lens and who I'm picking to come onto the show. It's a reflection of like a much larger collective in that way. Hi, fat cat. Hi. That's my cat.
Hello. I also meow.
That's great. And these days I've been enjoying it as like a theoretical space to also explore some of my like research passions, in terms of I'm doing my work, dissertation research in non-monogamy, and then my clinical work with psychedelics.
Oh, cool. That's very relevant to kind of where my mind is right now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, I kind of have been microdosing shrooms for the past, less than a month for sure. But I don't know, I'm just finding my own sort of rhythm with that. And I don't know, I feel like there's benefits to it. And then I feel that there can also be some negatives. But I think one thing that I have realized so far is that it feels really easy to just start and stop.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really noticed any, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of, I feel like I'm using it, or not I feel, but I'm pretty much using it as a replacement or an alternative to an SSRI, where it's like, yeah, those have positives, but then just personally for me, I don't like what they've done for
Mm-hmm.
me. I've tried like different ones, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of just like, I don't know. I feel like one thing that I actually do always is it's like, oh, is this right for me? By whether or not music still sounds good.
Mm.
I had just had many moments in the club where I was just like, it's like music is on and I just started an SSRI and I'm like, is this for me? Do I like the music? I know as a fact, like this is music I would like, but yeah,
Sure, sure,
I don't know.
sure. Yeah, I had my own journey as well with getting off of SSRIs and navigating all of that. So it's quite the individual experience and journey. I'm glad you found something that's working for you. That's great.
Yeah, no, definitely. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because Laura kind of also told me that, this conversation, interview, whatever you call it, isn't really intended to be that traditional in a way.
Yeah.
It's so funny because she was mentioning like, yeah, you might end up just like making like, I don't know, animal noises at some point or something, or like who knows.
That was the intro to the
That's
podcast. You might
so,
end up
like,
making animal noises.
I don't know, just like, yeah, I guess basically that you're a very open-minded person is kind
Yeah.
of the impression that I got. And
Ooh.
yeah,
Yeah, which is accurate, and I hope to continue to foster that, right? So, yeah, it should be a fun play space, theoretically. Let's get into it. How would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
yeah. Okay, first off, my name. My name is Fadl Fakhouri. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I have a very research-based practice, but more traditionally, my mediums are installation, performance, photo, and video. Yeah.
Very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing where all of our conversation goes today. I'm curious what your story is, take me through, yeah, your journey.
I'll start with my parents because that's really easy.
Sure, sure, go for it.
My parents were raised in Palestine in the West Bank, a town called Khalil, or also called Hebron. And they immigrated here in like the 80s, 90s. And yeah, and then I was born in San Francisco, which is where they immigrated to. And pretty much I stayed in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area until 22, 23. I'm currently 25 and back in the Bay Area. Yeah, I mean, I basically was supposed to be a doctor. I did the whole biology thing, worked in healthcare. I was really good at it, did my undergrad at Berkeley. And then once I graduated, I just was left with this underwhelmed and overwhelmed at the same time by the fact that, this is it. It's like I have to do whatever, like healthcare, science, whatever it is for the rest of my life. And it felt very close-ended for me, mostly because I was pressured to do it. Yeah, versus with the arts, it feels, I mean, it feels, but it can go in so many different directions. I mean, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm too harsh on science just because like like you kind of traumatize me, but like I actually do have a great appreciation for it. I think very scientifically when it comes to my artworks. I do a lot of sort of gathering data, variables, experimentation, and then expected results. Yeah, so my brain still very much works like that.
You found your groove now. You were saying that your parents moved to America. Was it just you, or did you have any other siblings? Or do
Yeah,
you have any other siblings? Yeah.
yeah. I'm the oldest.
Okay.
I have a sister who's a year younger, and then I have a brother who is 3 years younger.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So then within your own family, being the oldest, do you feel like there was a lot of pressure then to, like you said, to go into that doctor sort of profession?
Yeah, I mean, there's always been a lot of pressure in so many different ways. It's very much a case of what, like reaction formation or something. So I end up doing the opposite. So one
Sure.
would expect, oh, like the oldest son is going to be just like very traditional, like normative sort of roles. And then I'm actually the least normative in the family. I'm like also the most silly. And that's kind of always been a thing. I think for many people with many identities, this insecurity of trying to validate or have an authentic identity, it's kind of like, oh, what do I have to do to maintain this security I have? And that ties to, for example, queerness. Yeah,
Yeah. Are those various identities that you've experienced yourself in navigating the world?
definitely queerness in my own relationship to that. And I mean, first off, we all know that it didn't carry the same connotation or meaning that it does today, where, before it was a slur, and today it's more like something that people claim and own. And yeah, I mean, I've always been more of a fan of queer than anything else, just because it is supposedly more elusive. I really hate being captured, you know? Um,
Sure, 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 sure. Yeah.
yeah,
It's also
yeah,
the label I like, queer. I've always liked it. It felt expansive enough to be anything and everything and confusing and a little political and push it back, right? And that
yeah.
reclaiming.
As expansive and elusive and whatever you can be within language, because
Sure.
anything that is named, right, it's going to be sort of like pinned down. But if there was a way to just be without being named, I don't think that really, I don't know, that might be an interesting thing to discuss more. Like, I feel like that doesn't really exist just because we have such a desire to know, and there's such a discomfort with uncertainty.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yes. Uncertainty is one of our biggest fears, right? Change, all of that
Mhm.
sort of thing. But like, even if we have some sort of label like queerness, it never pins it down truly, right? Because
Mhm.
to some degree, like what I say as queerness and what you understand that word to be are completely different to some degree, right? And that's like the limited reality of any sort of language, right? If we really look at it and pinpoint it, like we're always stuck in our existential lenses to it. So it's like, even then there is no like queerness all across the board because everyone's going to have a different lens to seeing that and what that means, which is cool, right? And exciting. So I'm curious too. I mean, we're recording this, it's June 1st. I know it will be released in August, but happy Pride. I'm curious.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Uh,
I keep getting the notifications. I'm just like, happy LGBTQ plus one. Like,
yeah. I'd be curious if you'd want to talk a little bit more about your story to your queerness. And I feel like everyone has their own journey to that, but if you'd be willing to share, I'd love to hear it.
yeah. My story's not the most fun. Like,
That's okay. And if it's not,
yeah.
I will promise that there are other people who resonate with you and want to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, full clarification, like I'm pansexual, and I didn't really start identifying as that until what, last year or something.
Sure.
But it's really ironic because, so first off, like my story doesn't really involve like a crush or anything. I
Mm,
kind of I kind of wish that it did, because that seems more romantic and fun. I don't know. I'm very like not aggressive with my flirting. I'm like the
sure.
exact opposite. And I just kind of want to do like nice things and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know if this like makes sense to you. Basically, it's just that like I really don't know the words for this, but
Okay. That's okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, then take me even further back. Let's start from the very beginning. Like, yeah, your first, sexual desires, your first expansion in that space. Like, where were you at? What were you experiencing? What was taught to you, right? What was the family structure, ideas, and beliefs that were shared with you?
mm,
Show me your world.
mm. I mean, it's kind of always been just like, I don't know what's going on. Like,
Mm.
like mom, pick me up. Like help. I don't know what's going on. Like,
Sure.
yeah, I always just liked people as people. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of just like did what everyone else did, which was pretend to be straight,
Mm. Yeah.
but always feeling like I was different. And yeah, I don't know. I also, for example, I went to Sunday school, which is
Mm.
like it's interesting because I was raised Muslim. I'm not religious anymore.
Sure.
I haven't been actually like love was kind of my way of becoming less religious and whatnot. But yeah, I used to go to Sunday school and I always felt that I was different in that I wasn't really like into the religion or into the rules or into whatever, and that I was kind of just like trying to basically like get a good grade in
Mm-hmm.
holiness.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of just like kept that up for years, and then it was in college where I started thinking like, wait a second, I
Yeah.
think I'm queer. Like it just
Mm.
like happened to me to myself. Looking backwards, once I did realize that, and I feel like I still do that. It'll be like maybe next year I'll realize like, oh, when I was doing that, or like when that happened, like that was totally because I'm queer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Sure.
I feel like I'm just like a paradox in that I'll be at both ends of the spectrum in terms of guilt and shame or
Yeah.
whatnot. It's like, oh yeah, I should do this because it's fun. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, I shouldn't do that because it's not allowed or
Mm.
something. I just like allow myself to do things and then just like live with it, I guess. But
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
uh,
Living into the answers, feeling into the answers, allowing space for you to navigate that, feel it all out.
yeah,
I am curious, given my, areas of expertise in sex and relationships, like what was your sex education like?
yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in the US and like in California in the Bay Area, like a very like liberal, so-called like progressive place. And yeah, I mean, I had sex education like a class or two in, yeah, I think it was in high school.
Do you remember what they covered?
Uh, Honestly, it's so funny because I feel like I can only really recall like three memories, which one is like a birthing video.
Ooh.
And then one is like how to put a condom on. And
Yeah.
then what else could there be? Maybe a little bit on contraception
Okay.
methods other than condoms. Yeah.
What was the situation with the birthing video? Was it like to try and scare you, or was it this sort of like this is what could happen, or was it like this is what will happen? That like intense
Yeah.
fear.
Huh. It was kind of in the middle, I guess I would say. Like
Yeah.
have sex, but like be careful.
Okay.
It wasn't like be abstinent. It wasn't like that at all.
Was that this within a religious context or a public, yeah, more liberal school? I'd be curious too, like what was the religious context at the time for
Hmm.
you?
Right, yeah, because I did basically have like two educations
Uh,
in adolescence, right? It's like, but that was more so for yeah, my high school, like Monday through Friday, not the on the weekends. I don't think there was never any discussion of it during Sunday school. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And if there ever was something that kind of touched on that or sort of like approached that topic a little bit, then it was just like I use my hands a lot, so I don't know if this podcast will like only be
It's only audio.
audio,
Yeah.
right? So it's like you can't, what's the
Yeah.
word for this? Like,
Just like we're not going to talk about it.
yeah, just like we're not going to talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
get that away from me type stuff.
Sure. Because I went to a conservative Christian school, so then I didn't even get any sort of sex education. Like, I
Mhm.
didn't get a birthing video or a contraception video or even the condom thing. Like, I never got the, like, let's put the condom on a banana. So then I only
Yeah,
realized later that there's an actual orientation to the condom that you need to put it on the right way. Like, things that I just, I didn't get that education. Where do people
true.
learn these things?
Yeah. We actually, they gave out condoms at my high school, actually, but you had to
Wow.
go to like the office or something.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, that's better. I mean, we were taught very much so like abstinence only. You do not have
Mhm.
sex. And even if you got pregnant in my school, you'd get kicked out. Or what
Mm,
they would say is kindly ask you to leave.
mm. There was yeah, there was something. My high school was very interesting actually because there was this sort of like mini school on the same campus, and that
Mm,
was sort of like for the troubling, not what is it, like the kids that got in trouble. Yeah, a lot, like troublemakers, that's the word. And so it was kind of just like kids that kind of got caught like doing drugs, or like anyone who got pregnant was kind of like sent to this like random like little mini school. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't, it's so weird how much stuff kind of just like goes like over your head when you're younger. Like
Mm,
it's such a weird structure.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe not the best structure. I don't
Yeah.
know. Just
Yeah.
asking, you know?
Yeah. No, exactly. It's very like ostracizing and
Mm-hmm.
isolating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Was
Mhm.
queerness welcome within your school setting?
Yeah, I would say yes, but there wasn't any sort of like explicit. It was mostly like if it comes up, then like don't antagonize it.
What do
But
you
like
mean?
there's like if there's like a classmate or something that is queer, like don't bully the classmate
Got
or
it.
whatever.
That's a good start. We love that.
Yeah, there wasn't anything that kind of like emphasized sort of visibility, or which is like a whole other like discussion too.
Interesting. Yeah. So again, yeah, I'm hearing that it sounds like at your school was a little bit more liberal because queerness
Yeah.
was definitely not accepted in
Mhm.
my conservative Christian school. That would be a no. I don't think I saw anyone who was publicly out about their queerness at my high
Mhm.
school at all. That was not a safe space for that.
Yeah, what was sort of the setup? Was it like a co-ed school or
Yeah, it
yeah.
was it was a private Christian school in Southern California.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was all co-ed and there was a range of people there. Some people that went just for the private school, some people that specifically went for the Christian fact of it. And so,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, I had Bible class
Mhm.
throughout the week and then I had chapels throughout the week and then I'd go to
Mhm.
youth group later at night and then have Sunday service
Mhm.
with the family, you know? So like it was everywhere. And as a queer person myself, like I definitely didn't know I was gay at that point in my life. So that was a whole journey and a half, you know?
Word.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm curious about your experience where, even though you go to this very like religious school, there are still opportunities outside of that for you to like, did you have opportunities?
To explore my queerness.
Yeah. Or kind of like, was it kind of once you got to were able to like leave home?
Oh, yeah. Once I was able to leave home and I went out to college in the Midwest,
Mhm.
and, I was doing the sorority life thing, and then, you're drunk at a party making out with a
Mhm.
friend, and you're like, woo, So, like,
Yeah.
I think there was space to do it then, but even the college I went to was religious, so there was still that undertone
Mm.
there. Even though, in college there's probably a little bit more space. I mean, what I find fascinating is that I didn't have any idea when I was in high school, right?
Mhm.
I had seen, movies and had responses in my body and other sorts of things, but I think there was so much cognitive dissonance going on in a world where I was taught that that was one of the most abominable
Mm.
things I could do in my lifetime would be to be gay, right?
Mm.
And so like I just think there was so much cognitive dissonance that I couldn't even like fathom that being a part of myself. And so like you said, like it took being out, I guess it took alcohol enough to like turn
Mm.
that my brain down enough to
Mm.
explore it and then afterwards kind of sit with that and then have to sit through all the decoupling of internalized
Mhm.
homophobia that was
Mhm.
so deep that I
Mm.
still think personally continues in some ways today. Like it's hard for me
Yeah. Mhm.
to imagine a world like married to another woman because I can't imagine taking that woman home to my family, right? Like
Mhm.
it's just a part of the reality of living in that narrative when that is your space. So I'm still deconstructing it, you know?
Yeah, it's like that. Like we'll be deconstructing it for a while. But like
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely better now. I mean, personally for me, and I'm definitely assuming for you that it's definitely better than when you first, yeah, got that hint, you
Totally.
know? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Thinking about the things that, or the way that I would think about it was just very like phobic, like in a way, like,
Sure.
yeah, like looking back, I'll think like, oh my God, I can't believe that I said that or like thought that, which is like how a lot of the world thinks too, which is like wrong. But like uh that to be gay, you have to be a bottom. It's like
Mm,
one thing too, or like yeah, I don't know. I'm trying me just like trying to pull out like more problematic thoughts that I used to have. Like
Oh, sure. When I look back on my journey, I laugh. I remember being in college and I was in this sort of Bible class and we had to pick different topics that we wanted to debate upon in the class, right? And one of the topics was homosexuality, which I was like, oh yeah, like
Mm,
let me come in. I know the
mm,
Bible. Let me throw down the law and like show them
mm.
what's up. And so that
Yeah.
is 100% the topic that I signed up for. And I got up and I
Mhm.
was like, yeah, the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin. It's very clear here, 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 and here, here.
Uh, that sounds so traumatic. Like,
For the
no,
classmates or for me to have said it and then found out I was gay later.
right.
Both.
Yeah.
I know. Well, I think that I think is an interesting thing when we think about like cancel culture and other sorts of things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Navigating that reality between like holding people accountable for stuff and also that like some people come through in a lens in a world that is reinforced by their community structures so much so
Hmm.
that they can even have deep internalized homophobia about their own identities and like just
Yeah.
have no awareness. And so how do we keep those people accountable in a restorative justice framework
Hmm.
without having to cancel and ostracize people but also hold them accountable for the real pain they cause? It's beyond my pay rate, my pay grade, right?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's kind of just like there's people, I mean, family, for example, and I'm just like, it's just like capacity too. It's like, do I have the capacity to deal with this right now? And then it's kind of just like, you know what, like
Totally.
maybe let me just like, also, that's not for me right now, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting, like back to psychedelics, for example.
Sure. Yeah,
I
throw
feel
it.
like, yeah, I mean, like talking about my most recent trip, yeah, it was shrooms. And
Mhm.
I remember there was this succulent, and I was kind of like laying down near it. And it was like pointy, right? And it was against my back. And I was just like, ouch, like it, because it hit me.
Sure.
I was just like, you know what? Like, I can't be mad at this cactus succulent thingy. Like, it's literally just there. Like,
Mm.
it's just not for me. You know, that was
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the an intro to that trip. So that's something that I've kind of been trying to internalize more is just because I'm not involved doesn't mean that like either of us are bad, you know? It's just like thinking about compatibility and whatnot. Like we don't all have to be friends. We don't all have to think the same thing. Just like don't harm me. But you know,
Right.
like in some ways, us being together is harmful.
Mm. What do you mean by that?
Or like there's different ways to figure out to be with each other. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
there is a way I can exist with this cactus that isn't harmful.
Mm-hmm. Which is space. Don't
Yeah,
touch me.
like
Cactus, no.
literally. Yeah, but it's just like it's just not for me right now or
Oh, totally.
whatnot. It's like, yeah, does that make sense to you? Like,
Yeah, yeah, that you had a profound moment on the medicine of this kind of reframe of how you interact with the world, right? Like this object's doing its own thing, I can do my own thing, and maybe I just go in a different direction. That sounds like it was a powerful experience that you want to keep reflecting on and integrating into your life.
mhm. Yeah. And I don't know if you experience this on shrooms is and consistently I'll have these very sort of like foundational thoughts
Mm-hmm.
while doing shrooms, thinking about the beginning of time or whatever. So
Mm,
just thinking about, oh, humans, like we exist at such a weird time in evolution. It's like we're
yeah.
animals, but then we're not allowed to be animals, kind of things that are. And then this is something that I try to tap on into my uh, art practice as well, is either overperformance or underperformance. So, for example, you know, thinking about this blanket or even thinking about a scarf being used for comfort, it's like there's a limit, you know, like there's a limit to you merging with this object. Like if the scarf is too tight, then it's not even going to be comfortable
Sure.
anymore.
Sure.
Yeah, or even water, you know, too much water, you'll drown.
Right, yeah, too much of anything is
Mhm,
maybe not a good thing. I think as you were speaking, I was thinking about the thought. I've always kind of joked where I'm like, yeah, like you always watch, I have a little cat. You saw my little cat
mhm,
come up earlier. Like, we'll giggle because we'll put a box out and then a cat will like hop into it and be like, "Oh, I like box," right? And it's like
Mm,
we do the same thing as humans. Like, here
mm,
I am this. Here are boxes to put me in of who I am and what I do and where I'm at in the world because like you said earlier, right? Like the unknown being so scary, the unknown, the uncertain change, all those pieces. So we like to like pinpoint our narratives, our experience in these things that are static, in these boxes, in these various identities, when maybe it's much more fluid than that.
mm, mm.
Just thoughts.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's just how, for example, language is a compromiser. It's a sort of way of negotiating, like for example, identity. Like how can a word speak to existence? Or I've been thinking about bell hooks a lot too,
Sure.
actually, with how she kind of starts off the book, or very early on in the book she states that love is a verb.
Mm,
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting too to think about that in terms of any sort of identity. It's like doing and whatnot.
yeah, what does that mean to you? Love is a verb. How do you interpret that?
Just to keep on putting in the work and putting in the actions and behaviors and whatnot.
I'm curious, have you heard the word new relationship energy?
Mm, no, but I feel like I can tell what that means,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Within the non-monogamous, open relating community, there's like this common term around that of like new relationship energy. You know, you might
Mm,
be in your stable relationships and then you meet someone
mm,
new, and then all of a sudden you're so excited, so about them, so in it, right? And
mm,
it's interesting to talk about the neuroscience behind that of the various chemicals going on in our brain that actually mirror cocaine so that
mm,
it's like that new relationship energy is a drug, right? And you get so
mm,
high up into it. I was just having an experience with that myself where I was like, okay, how do I be a responsible drug user? How do I stay calm in my
mm,
like super new romantic stage?
mm,
Because like the reality is that stage of excitement and all of that doesn't necessarily, it transforms into a different feeling. And that's what I was thinking about when you were saying that love is a verb, right? You know, like especially in that beginning stage of love and excitement and
mm,
rapture and all of that. It's so heightened and exciting. And yeah, you know, compared to maybe that stage of finding stability and finding security, and then love being that choice of like, I'm going to show up for this person. I'm going to
mm,
be here. I'm going to grow with you in
mm,
that. And it very much so being a verb rather than this transient feeling state that we have, particularly at the beginning of a relationship.
mm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm wondering also about when you keep doing something, it gets easier.
Mm,
Like in certain relationships, it'll feel like, oh wow, like I remember learning how much of an effort relationships are. I mean, at the
yeah.
beginning, and once you pass the whole like honeymoon stage or whatever, like all this euphoria, and then it's like you kind of come down to earth and it's like, oh damn, if I want to like keep those good feelings coming, then I have to like put in work
Hmm.
and sort of uh
Or
yeah,
invest. Yeah,
yeah,
rather.
you have to invest time.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly. Yeah, because the work idea, I'm like, ooh, I guess it is work in some ways, but I guess I don't necessarily see it in that frame.
mm,
I don't see watering my plants as work. I guess I see it as an investment, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, like more so work in I mean, it depends like what sort of like definition you're using. Like,
totally. And
yeah,
it depends on the relationships, right? Like
yeah.
some relationships do quite literally take a lot of work. I would say that connecting with like kind of like we were talking about earlier, right? Relationships with maybe my family who's more conservative, like
Hmm.
that does take more work in my relationship to check various parts of myself that might not feel safe to share, various things that maybe they don't understand, and like to still invest in that relationship does
Hmm.
take a lot of work and time and energy, right? So
Yeah.
but I guess what I'm saying too is that like my romantic and sexual relationships have felt like play. They haven't felt like work lately. So then that's the other piece of it all.
Yeah, when it's so new, it
Mm.
feels like work in a way, or like it just feels more scary and whatnot. And then
Mhm.
you keep doing it, and then it's just you forget that you're even doing it. It just because like I can do this with my eyes closed type of situation, right? Yeah.
That's been my experience with like jealousy a little bit, I would say, in terms of this process. Like you had said, like things that get easier over time. I'd say definitely in my relationships with open relating, like jealousy has been one of those things that has like significantly gotten better with time that I
Mm.
wouldn't have been able to predict, a couple of years ago in that way.
Mm. Yeah, I'm curious about what that looked like for you because I feel that it's also gotten easier for me.
Sure. Yeah. I think that the first time that someone had mentioned non-monogamy to me, I was like, well, you don't love me enough. I was like, if you loved me enough, then you would want to be monogamous with me. And that's kind of how I started into this world. And then eventually realized that I was having my own feelings for multiple people and kind of started to step into what that would look like navigating that space in in open communication and dialogue. But
Mhm.
I think that the first time that you do it, I've definitely talked about this as its own form of psychedelic experience, right? If you
Mhm.
have been raised in a reality where it's all monogamy, it's all the romance of like you meet that one, the one, and the only
Mhm.
one, then to step on any sort of reality that is not the typical is, I believe, its own form of psychedelic experience. So you can
Mhm.
expect those same sorts of things when that first time that you have that experience where reality starts to bend and it's a little bit scary because we're like, what's
Mhm.
going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Compared to
yeah.
maybe if you've had multiple times in psychedelic experiences and comfort with the different ranges of what those can be, right? Like those that practice really helps. So I will say at first it was scary and it was a lot of like open conversations with my partner of what that meant. And even noticing now there's still times where like it brings up certain things in my body and I'm able to like breathe through it and talk about it. And now my metamor, my
Mhm.
partner's other partner, is like one of my closest friends, and
Mhm.
that's magical. I could have never thought that that would happen in this journey.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think
Yeah.
also just because I used to kind of have this sort of approach where I would be more like solo poly or just kind of like
Mm,
single in a way. And then like, oh, I would catch feelings, fall deeply in love, and it's just like, I want you for myself, or like I want to offer myself to you. And then I had this really real awakening where I kind of just realized you can't even possess in monogamy, like we're all free to do what we want to do, or like you kind of just have to trust, for example, that people aren't gonna hurt you, or
mhm.
I was like driving the other day. I mean, this is like such a dramatic example, but like I was driving the other day with a friend, and it's kind of just like, oh, the trust that, like, for example, that like one of us is not gonna like fuck with this driving, like make like,
Sure.
like we just trust that like no one's gonna like pull the wheel suddenly or something, like super
Mhm.
dramatic. Like when do you ever have these like random thoughts that are just like the worst thing? Like it's just like a possibility that like your brain calculates
Yeah.
like please don't do that. Like,
Right, absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's sort of like worst case scenario. Yeah, and I think for me, like I am a total romantic in
Mhm.
110 different ways, right? And like I hold space for the beauty and the sacredness of a monogamous contract that people, a sacred contract that people embark upon together, and the beauty and the richness of that. I will say for me, it like I don't think that possession is the highest form of love. I
Mhm.
will say, as a romantic, it's scary, right? Like, because the person could leave, but like you said, in
Mhm.
monogamy, they could leave at any point as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Hmm.
So, within that framework, you know what actually feels really good to me? The reality that my partner is a bird that is not in a cage, and my partner could fly around the whole world and have
Hmm.
any partner that they want in their life because they have that freedom. And you know who they choose to spend time with every week?
Hmm.
Me.
Yeah.
And every time that they come to see me, it is free. And it is not because we've made some sort of like forced commitment in that way, even though obviously we do have commitments to one another that are beautiful in terms of like promising to be there for one another in whatever shape our relationship takes over the years in terms of sexual, romantic, platonic. Like that sort of commitment there is so beautiful. But yeah, it feels to me that feels super romantic. I don't know.
Hmm.
I think we need a new open relating romantic framework, which to me is that, yeah, my partner is choosing me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of this is kind of an ironic thing that like happened to me where I was worried like back when I really wanted to like both possess and be possessed is
Sure.
that we basically were monogamous before in that like we were spending all of our time with each other and only with each other. And then I still felt like like why don't you just like say it or like like why don't we just like say that we're like in a closed relationship or like let's close this. And it's just like it kind of like by action or behavior or whatever it already like was closed in that case. And then even thinking beyond that, it's like if you're in a non-monogamous relationship or you're poly or whatever it is you want to say, that it is like always closed in a way, if that makes sense. Like
How so?
like I mean that not necessarily close, but like there's a trust. Like you are bonded to each other, you are attached to each other. Like
Yeah, think about your best friend, right? Like
yeah,
you
exactly.
have a commitment to them
Mhm.
that has maybe been unspoken in some ways, right? Like you trust your friends are going to be there without having to have this sort of you're my only best friend and
Yeah,
no one else can touch you. And like
yeah.
the ownership thing, like that's where kink comes in for me because I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
own me. Let's play with that. Let's go
Right.
there. Let's do all of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I like to play with that, right? Like we have a very fun dynamic with one of my partners where like that is 100% what we do. Like I like to
Mhm.
feel like his object. I like to feel
Mhm.
like his owned possession that he can walk around and parade around as his thing. And like I love that. And also I have the freedom at any point to go explore whatever I want with anybody else.
Yeah.
So it's like the
Mhm.
yes and to that of like, I want to feel owned and I am in some ways, and also absolutely not in any ways at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, non-monogamy is such a good way to unlearn feelings of shame. Yeah, that's something for me that, and I'm still working on it because that's going to be a process and whatnot. But yeah, it's nice to just feel that my feelings aren't wrong and that they're
Right.
literally like the feelings that I have to be attracted to more than one person is just like everyone like for I mean not everyone but like like it's a very common very common feeling, and it's nice to not feel some sort of shame like how
Right.
I used to not even look at other people because I'm like I can't right now like you know.
This is 100% the romance myth, right? That has been perpetuated that, when you fall in love, you only have eyes for one other
Mm,
person, no one else. You're so enwrapped, you're so excited. And I think as a society, as a culture, we're starting to deconstruct that more and hold space for the reality that, like, yeah, other human beings are art. And I want to be able to go out and whether you do it monogamously, right, or open relating, right? Because you can acknowledge beauty and sexual attraction with other people and choose to maybe not spend your time and energy there because the reality is of open relating, you're diversifying your time and energy across multiple people and some people might not want that.
mhm,
However, coming to a space where we can normalize the reality that other people are attractive, you're going to have crushes on them and then you get to decide what you want to do with that.
mm,
That's huge for society. And I think it's
mm,
important to continue to talk about that because a lot of
mm,
people, like you said, will have shame if they're in this like
mm,
super loving relationship and they have attraction for someone else. Like, oh no, does it that is 100% what
mm.
has been in every like rom-com and all the bullshit
Yeah.
media that says the second you love someone else, those like Tumblr quotes, the second you
Mm.
love someone else, you should leave because you never loved the first one, really. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, it's just it's so toxic, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I don't want to hate on monogamy. Like,
Well, right, because
right.
it's beautiful. Monogamy is beautiful when that's what people are choosing and wanting to do, right? Like
Mhm.
there's so much sacredness to deciding that you're going to focus all of your energy, all of your sexuality to one person.
Mhm.
However, that's not the greatest thing for all people. Some people
Yeah.
really enjoy a world where they're able to explore, find out different parts of themselves and,
Mhm.
you could have one best friend your whole life, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like that's how some people live, like in complete solitude, enjoying one best
True.
friend. However, that is not the life I live, and I have multiple best friends, and I learn parts of myself in these different relationships,
Mhm,
including the sexual ones. I'll have
mhm,
some dynamic with one person that brings out a part of myself that has never come out in my other dynamics, just like our friendships, and we have other
mhm,
friendships that bring out parts of us. So it's like
mhm,
there's nothing wrong with having one best friend, but maybe that's not the life you want to live, and you've been
mhm.
sold a model that said that's the only way to do this. And so
Yeah.
hence here I am talking about it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's so many things to talk about and more, but
How has your journey been with polyamory?
I mean I'm still learning to be honest, like I haven't been and I don't know if I ever will be in like two relationships or like two, what is it, like having two partners at once or like two, I mean just because of like time and whatnot.
Sure. Relationships, because I would assume you probably have multiple relationships in your life. By relationships,
Mhm.
do you mean like sexual and romantic?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I'm still like, yeah, it has to do with like time and commitment and because I
Yeah.
want to be fully present for people and give them my all. It's just like in this time of my life, I want to dedicate a lot to my art,
Yeah, I feel the
you
same.
know?
I feel the
Yeah.
same way with grad school and the dissertation and the podcast. I'm like, y'all, I
Mhm.
have a relationship with a podcast. Like,
No, literally,
I got to
yeah.
show up every week to that date, you know?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean also and my relationship with myself, but
Totally.
it's interesting too because I've learned that you can build a relationship or a positive relationship with yourself or like for example learn to love yourself by being in love with other people, you
It,
know?
well,
Like
psychology would be like, yeah, that is how we form a sense
yeah,
of identity is through our
yeah.
relationships. So, like, yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting because I feel that a lot of us are told that you can't love anyone else until you love yourself. And it's just like, how is that even possible? Like, how are you going to learn even to like this sort of like language of love, basically, if you're not speaking it?
Well, totally. That's where we can deconstruct the idea of like a Western concept of self, which is so
Mhm,
individualistic. It is so like you are the individual, figure out who you are. And like we could definitely blame the patriarchal field of psychology for creating that sort of reality, right? Like here's a diagnosis, place it on the person, all of that sort of stuff. But the reality is like our sense of identity is shaped through all of our different relationships, including our relationships to like a higher power, society, family, friends. Like we internalize those. And then
mhm,
that's who we are and how we move through the world. So like all of this language of like, yeah, you need to learn to love yourself first. I feel like the intention is good, right? That like there's maybe parts of ourselves that need healing, which you do in relationships, by the
yeah.
way, whether I say that's in a capitalistic therapeutic model or community. So like how are you going to learn to love without those relationships? However, it's like I see the intention there of like learn to love yourself so that you're not putting so much of your self-worth into the other people, right? Learn to
Mhm,
see who you are as a beautiful
mhm,
gift to humanity. But it's also like you said, the way that
mhm,
we learn how to do that is when your whole community looks at you and
mhm,
says you're valuable, you're worthwhile. Because if you grow up
mhm,
in a home where everyone looks at you and says you're a piece of shit and wrong,
mhm.
how are you supposed to love yourself? And that's also where
Yeah.
we can talk about society, right? Thinking about pride,
Mhm,
queerness, all of that, right? Like if society says you're worthless and all that stuff, to look at that person and be like, wait till you love yourself to find community. Like, no, no,
mhm.
we're all suffering with someone who came in with some sort of negative message that we weren't enough, that we were wrong. And so it takes literally, quite literally takes relationships to change that. But all of this is a relationship where they mean romantic, sexual, right? And this is where I start to feel really big disconnects with like
Mhm,
the society or like people who just say, yeah, like a relationship. Cause I'm like, which one do you mean? Because we have so many, you
mhm.
know?
Yeah, that's why like I get lost with the terminology sometimes. Or
Yeah.
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 Because it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, because everything is a relation, like you have a relationship to everyone, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's the frame, right? That's the shift. People starting to think in that way of like, oh, yeah, this is a relationship. And like you said, they take time and energy, right? So, like, thinking about you know, this is your garden. Like, how much do you want to pour into this relationship and it will grow accordingly? Maybe you have a cactus friend, you know, who's like
Mm.
super chill, doesn't need lots of watering, you know, like you get to make your garden and like, what do you want to plant and so, you know, build.
Mm.
It's exciting. I find it exciting. I find this so exciting, this world where people can build these relationships that make them happy instead of trying to. One of my guests has used the idea of like a Lego manual, right? Like taking out the
Mm.
Lego manual to say, like, here's all the blocks. What do you
Right.
want to build? And that's
Mm.
scary because then it's like, well, there's no manual, Nicole. How am I supposed to
Mm.
do this? What am I supposed to do? Where am I
Mm.
going to be in 60 years, right? And it's like,
Mm.
you get to make that reality.
Yeah, and also just living in the present, but making sure that you can get to the future in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, which is tricky because you can't think too far ahead, right? Like then we can get into
Yeah.
like Buddhist things, like, you know,
Uh-huh.
staying in the present moment, but like
Mm.
planning. It's just, oh, yeah, there's so much there.
Mm. Yeah.
It sounds like you're deconstructing a lot and exploring lots of new things.
Yeah, no, definitely. Will continue to deconstruct because things are always being constructed. I'll continue to
Yeah.
construct and deconstruct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's probably going to be our lifetime, right? Until we're 80 one day, still
Yeah.
deconstructing the ways that society is affecting us, right?
Doing and undoing. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to hold some space for in case we didn't hit on anything that maybe you wanted to share or talk about today.
Mm.
Otherwise, I have a closing question I ask all of my guests.
Yeah, I guess just an announcement about an exhibition.
Sure, go
That's
for it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've never been to Chicago. I'll be part of an exhibition called Double Blessings at the Roots and Culture Contemporary Art Center in Chicago. And so either opening August 4th or 5th. Um,
You can send me the link, and then that way
yeah.
it will be in the show notes. So that
Right.
way everyone can find it linked down
Cool.
below.
Yeah, so first or second week of August till first or second week of September.
Exciting. Well,
Yeah.
congrats on that show. And I really hope you enjoy Chicago. You'll have to make it out to the lake and get some
Yeah.
time out in our beaches out here and enjoy it.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go
Yeah.
to Smart Bar.
Hey, Smart Bar. Yeah. I recently celebrated the end of my semester there with a
Oh,
dance or
cool.
two in that hazy fog.
Yeah, it's just so it's interesting because there's all these different sort of like clubs around the world that you just hear about, and it's just like it sounds like it's still popping.
Yeah, oh, it's poppin'. I didn't know it was one of
Yeah.
those like more famous. Yeah, there's a lot of dance and like music, which is and house music, which is really fun in that space.
Mm.
And I've had a good time many a times on that dance floor.
Oh,
Yeah.
I hope I will too.
Yeah. Well, then I will ask you, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Hmm. I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm such a freak. It's like, what is normal? Like,
Amen to that.
what is normal? I think just that literally every single person is self-conscious in a way. Like,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, we have to be like conscious of the self to be able to like do anything, I feel. So, like people that are on stage, for example, like they're nervous, like everyone's literally nervous. So it's just
yeah.
like I feel like the disconnect, like you kind of have to like do a disconnect in that point where it's like, yeah, I'm anxious about going on this stage or being in front of people or whatever, but you kind of just have to like keep doing it until it doesn't feel that way anymore, and just
Yeah.
it's basically exposure therapy. So I
Right,
think like
right.
especially me because I do a lot of performance work, and so it's like I will get nervous, and I mean less so than before, but literally like everyone is nervous.
Oh,
Like literally everyone
yeah.
is nervous, like everyone's anxious and like worried no matter how confident they seem. So it's like do the thing. Do the thing you want to do even if you feel anxious about it.
Yeah,
And also
yeah.
people forget you're not going to do so bad. The worst that you can do, I feel, is like be underwhelming. Like
Right,
and
right,
like absolutely like fuck up and like everything,
right.
like that's not going to happen. Like
Right. Yeah,
uh,
the research shows that people tend to remember the beginning and the end of the
mm,
experience. So whenever I'm teaching yoga and I like
mm,
mess up and have something, I'm like, it's okay, Nicole. They're gonna remember the beginning and the end, so finish strong.
right.
And I think that Yeah, everyone wants to be loved, right? And everyone wants to be accepted. So anytime, yeah, someone's stepping up onto that stage, like we all humanly have the worst fear of being rejected. And so like we
Mhm.
can get nervous and in that. And I think as someone who, is working in therapy with clients, like being able to hear how many other people feel the same way, as someone myself who has struggled with social anxiety, yeah, it has been so eye-opening, yeah, to realize how many other people feel the same way. And then when I am personally in spaces, I try to remember that intentionally of like, yeah, everyone's feeling the same thing. Like I can relax, like everyone is feeling the same like level of self-awareness, self-consciousness. And in that, that provides me some peace with the experience to know that, yeah, I'm not the only one feeling this way. So I don't have to continue to spiral down it, right? Because it's that first thought of like, oh no. And it's like, oh no, I'm having the thought. Oh no,
Mhm.
oh no, no, it won't
Yeah.
stop, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
and it just keeps going compared to that like
Mm.
first moment of like, yes, I have that thought. I know why I have that thought because I want to feel safe, loved, and everyone else has this thought, right? And like then I go a completely different direction and then I'm dancing on stage, you know?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And you just
Yeah.
go dancing on stage.
Exactly, and that's how we dance. Well, it was lovely to have you today. Where would you want to
Uh,
plug? I know you mentioned your show, but is there anywhere else you'd want to plug so that people can find your work and connect with you?
yeah, I mean Instagram, that's like the artist's LinkedIn basically.
Yeah, these days, right?
Yeah, you can follow me at FadlFakhouri, and that's also my portfolio website's there too, like fadlfakhouri.com. I think that's it. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast and having a conversation with me today.
Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for going with the free flow energy.
Of course.
Yeah. If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.